Good morning, students. Today again we are here from Student Skill Enrichment Board. This is the 40th live webinar. I welcome all of you on the 40th live webinar on the practical approach to GST filing. This initiative has been started by the Student Skill Enrichment Board to aid and standardize the practical aspects of training for students pursuing articleship. I think with continuous 40 Saturdays, you all are taking benefit out of it. Now, today we have two eminent speakers with us, CA Bhavani Mujakari and CA Dr. Srinath NG. I welcome both the eminent speakers. Dr. Srinath NG, he is a doctorate in finance and taxation by the World Human Rights Protection Commission for rendering services to the profession. He is a visiting faculty at ICI, IC Cost Accountant of India and the IC Company Secretaries of India. He is heading the domestic vertical in International School for Finance Studies and Avinash Group of Institutes. CA Bhavani Mukherjee is moderating the session. She is the first woman CA from her community, has 5 years of experience with PwC into indirect taxation. She has started her practice in Bhavani Associates to pursue her passion towards profession and an active member of FICCI FLO, Women Wing of FICCI. She has been a speaker for the flow session Empowering Your Mind on Financial Literacy. I welcome both the speakers on this session and hand it over the session to you, sir. Srinath, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. My dear chairman and the other dignitaries. Thank you, Vidhi Gupta ji, for your introductory remarks. I think now the students would have been aware of what is the session about and what is that we are going to deal with. So I welcome all the students who are aspirant of qualifying the prestigious course, I can say, the Chartered Accountancy. And yes, this session, I am very confident that this will provide you a lot of benefit and you can really claim that amount of benefit from this session. So wishing you all the very best. So let me start off with the session quickly. Vidhi ji, I can start off straight away. Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. So thank you, Bhavani ma'am, for being the moderator of this session. I hope you two have a good time in this session. And thank you, Kapil ji, also for taking out time on this Sunday. And really, I appreciate all the students who are live on this Sunday, because I know very well that how Sunday is important for every one of us. But yes, for learning some important things, Sunday is very much prestigious is what I can say. So quickly, let us go into the session. So today's session basically is on practical aspects of GST returns filing, especially because this one, I can say it's such a topic where you can learn as well as earn. That is what I can say. So generally, when we do our CA course and all, we just keep learning, but we start earning only after completing our course. Whereas the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India have brought out this very good subject, and they want us to, make all the students aware about the GST return filing and what are the practical difficulties which are faced by the common return filers or the taxpayers, I can say. So this session would completely be focusing on GST returns filing and what are the glitches which a student or any taxpayer may face while filing the GST return. So let us quickly get into the session. So in this session, basically, first we should know, is it mandatory to file GST return? And if so, who is mandatorily required to file GST return? Now, prior to these two, let us understand why should we first of all file GST return and what is it going to provide? Why did the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs introduce this GST return filing? So before we directly go to GST return filing, let us also know why or how it was in the old regime. That is when we had VAT, that is your value added tax. We had even central excise duties. Of course, I'm not going to discuss anything on customs because customs is prevailing even now after the introduction of GST. So prior to 1st July 2017, we had to file VAT returns, and that VAT returns was basically state to state. So every state, the return forms were different. The procedure, I'll not say the calculation procedure, I'll only say the filing procedure was little different from state to state. And when it comes to central excise duty, it was becoming very difficult for the central government to compare and consolidate the data received from various states, because at that point of time, I mean to say prior to 1st July 2017, we had only manual returns. It was not mandatory to have returns to be filed online. Because of this, it was taking a lot of time for the government to compare and consolidate the data. And in turn, it was leading to the decision making, which was getting delayed actually. So I can say it was leading to off time decision making. So instead of on time, the decisions were not taken on time. So because of this, the fiscal policies of the government also was getting affected. Because generally the government presents all the fiscal policies on 1st February every year by the way of budget. Every one of you are aware, recently on 1st February 2023 also budget was presented by the Union Finance Minister. So in the same way, in order to present the budget, these kind of hindrances were there prior to 1st July 2017. And with effect from 1st July 2017, introduction of GST came into picture. Now, when introduction of GST has come into picture, the NDA government, that is the BJP government, has very clearly told with the introduction of GST, everything should become non-human invasive method or intrusive method, which means there should be no involvement of human beings in this procedure of GST filing. So indirectly or in short, what we can say here is the government was very much focused only on online filing. That is, they wanted to make everything electronic. The reason being, as I told, comparison and a compilation of data was very easy, and due to which the government could take timely decisions. So this was introduced when Sri Arun Jaitley ji was the finance minister in 2017. However, we can say introduction of GST was initially the idea of Congress government. Since they could not be successful by placing this bill, GST bill in the parliament in various attempts, 2012, 13 and all. Later on, the NDA government, that is BJP government, was formed in 2014, and slowly after 3 years, after various discussions in the parliament, they felt, yes, it is now the time, it is the need for bringing a simplified procedure for all the taxpayers, because the country is going towards or looking towards digitalization. So when the country is basically looking towards digitalization, everything should also be digitalized. So with that intention, the government has introduced filing of GST returns only on an electronic basis. So no more filing of GST returns offline in the sense manually. So you need not go and stand in a big queues before the sales tax departments or before the GST department, wasting your time, wasting your energy, wasting your travel time, wasting your travel cost, which were actually happening prior to 1st July 2017. So this is the intention of bringing this GST returns, filing of GST returns electronically. And then the two questions which I was saying, why you should file GST return and who has to file GST return. These were the two questions I was posing prior to introduction of or comparison of GST with the old indirect tax laws. So first of all, why you should file GST return? As I told, it gives an information to the government on what all taxes you have paid. So it basically passes on various informations to the government very easily. Secondly, in order to know whether you are complying with the provisions of GST law or not, this filing of GST returns is required. And thirdly, if you do not file your GST returns for a consecutive period of 6 months, your GST registration can be cancelled suo motu by the officer of the GST. That is nothing but the GST department can directly suo motu, that is on their own will, they can cancel your registration. However, before cancelling, they will give you a show cause notice. They'll give you a reasonable opportunity. You have to answer, because there might be some situations where assessee was not feeling well, or I can say taxpayer was not feeling well. Hence, you will be, I should not say might, you will be given an opportunity before cancellation. That is the reason why they bought one concept called suspension instead of direct cancellation. In 2019, this concept of suspension was introduced, because prior to that, it was straight away cancellation. But later on, with effect from 2018, they have come across various difficulties faced by the taxpayers, and hence they felt the need, no, it is not like that. We have to provide an opportunity. Hence, we will initially suspend it. We will not cancel it. So straight away, they cannot cancel it. They will only suspend and they'll give you time. Of course, in the going forward in the session, we will discuss all those points. And now, who has to file GST returns is what is the question. Every taxpayer. Now, when I use the word taxpayer from GST perspective, I can say every person who is liable to pay GST. Now, when I say every person liable to pay GST, it is not the end consumer I am talking of. I am talking of the businessman. Because GST returns filing is not applicable to the end consumer like us. Say, for example, we go to a provisional store to buy some notebook or chocolate or biscuit, something. When we pay amount, yes, it says MRP inclusive of taxes. Now, that means we have paid taxes. That does not mean we are required to file GST returns. You have to be careful. So this GST returns is basically for the persons who are carrying on business. So those people who have registered themselves in GST as per section 22 or 23 or 24, they have of CGST Act 2017, they have to mandatorily file GST returns. As I told, if they fail to file GST returns, the consequence is for a consecutive period of 6 months, if they fail, then their GST registration is liable to be cancelled. Now, why I told this point is, one of my client, he asked me that he got himself registered in GST, and he asked me, sir, my turnover is less than 20 lakhs, which is actually the threshold limit for registration. But still, since law says voluntary registration is possible, I got myself registered voluntarily. Now, I don't have a turnover above 20 lakhs. Should I file GST returns? This was a question posed by my client. Now, what is the answer we have to give? As a professional student, you have to be very careful. Just don't get carried away what the client says. You have to be always aware of what are the provisions in GST. So GST provisions very clearly say that whether you have any sale or purchase in a particular month, once you are registered, you have to file GST returns irrespective of the turnover limit. So that is the reason why, even though if your turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs, you have to file GST returns because you have already got registered. No, that is not the mistake of the government. That is your mistake. No, Government never forced you to come and file, get registered when your turnover is not exceeding 20 lakhs. So this kind of problems your clients are, facing. I'll not call it as a problem. Rather, I'll say this kind of doubts are there in the client's mind. So please try to educate them. The GST law does not say that you should not file the return if your turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs. GST law is very, very clear on that perspective. So we as a professionals or professional students, we have to be very careful while dealing with the client. And some clients come to us, sir, okay, you told GST return has to be done or has to be filed even though the turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs. But what if in a particular month, I do not have any sale or any purchase? That means what, sir? I am not liable to pay the tax. So as per you, just now you told, sir, if you are liable to pay the tax, you have to file GST return. So this is the question which is being posed by them. So please understand, even though they are not having any sale or purchase in a particular month, they are mandatorily required to file GST returns because, again, I'm coming back to the same point, they are registered in GST. Otherwise, again, I'm going back to the same point, their GST registration is liable to be cancelled. So you need to be very cautious on these grounds. Okay, so this is only an overall idea of what I have given. So let us quickly jump into the subject where we can just exactly know what are the provisions in GST. So before that, introduction to filing of GST returns electronically. Now, this is what I was telling you earlier. When you are having the GST registration, you should mandatorily file the GST returns electronically only. It is not manual. So please be careful. Why electronically? I have already given the reasons. So initially, let us see what are the provisions which are covering the filing of GST returns. So if you see here, the very first point says the provisions relating to filing of GST returns are covered under Chapter 9 of CGST Act, obviously 2017. Now in the Chapter 9, Section 37 to 48 covers the provisions relating to filing of GST returns. Now, what is the need or necessity to file GST return? So let us see. The return solves the following purposes. What are they? As I was telling you, mode for transfer of information to tax department. So in order to take a timely decision, wise decision, immediate decision, need basis decision, for all these things, you should file GST return. So then only the government will be able to take proper decisions whatsoever. Similarly, compliance verification program of tax department. Now, whether you have complied by the law, that is the provisions of the law or not, the tax department will verify. I mean to say, when you are filing the GST returns, you know very well, there will be output tax. There will also be input tax. So whenever you are paying the GST, you know very well, you have to reduce the amount of input tax from the output tax, and then only you have to pay the balance. Now, while reducing this input tax, you know very well, input tax credit is available subjected to Section 16 and Section 17 of the CGST Act 2017. So, the government will verify whether you are following the provisions of Section 16 and Section 17 or not. One best example, I'll tell you how the government will verify. Now, say for example, we have taken a motor vehicle insurance. Now, as per Section 17, it is a blocked credit. Now, when I say blocked credit, that means the input tax credit on the insurance paid for the motor vehicle will not be available. This is what the law is saying. Now, what would the insurance people would have done? The insurance people would have filed the GST returns saying that we have, sold our insurance to one of the customer. His GST number is so and so. So that is what they will mention in their GSTR number 1. Correct. Now, once the insurance company files GSTR number 1, that amount, whatever insurance is there on that, the CGST and SGST portion will appear to you in your GSTR 2A as well as in GSTR 2B. Now, they will verify whether you availed this ITC or not. So generally what we will do, since we are aware about the GSTR2 and all, since it is available, I mean to say the credit is appearing in GSTR2B, what we will do straight away, we will take up the credit and pay the balance amount of tax. Then after you file, the GST department will verify whether you have availed the proper credit. And if you haven't availed and you haven't followed section 16 and section 17, it will straight away send us a love letter saying, boss, this is the amount of GST you have claimed, whereas in this amount, so much amount is ineligible. Ineligible means nothing but it is blocked as per section 17. Since you have availed it, please repay it back along with interest. This is the notice the GST department will send. So for sending such notices, first of all, we have to file GST returns. Then only the government will be having a knowledge. That is what is the second point, compliance verification program of the tax department. Similarly, if you see third point, finalization of tax liabilities by the taxpayer. This is the reason why I mentioned about GSTR number 1, GSTR number 2A, 2B, and now I'm going to mention about GSTR 3B. Now, whether the taxpayer has exactly calculated and properly calculated his tax liability or not, it will be reconfirmed by the GST department. So GST department, how it can reconfirm it? Only based on the returns what you filed. So that is the reason why they are asking you to file the GST returns. Similarly, fourth point, if you observe, providing necessary inputs for taking policy decisions. This is what I was saying you. If government wants to take any decisions on fiscal policy, yes, or it wants to make any tax proposals in the upcoming budget, that and all it can do only by having some data with it. Now, what is the data? The data is nothing but our income, is nothing but our GST returns. That is the reason why you have to file your GST returns. Similarly, the last one, if you observe, management of audit and anti-evasion programs of tax administration. So now, my say for example, I have bought some goods from some taxpayer. I mean to say some person who is registered under GST. I am also registered under GST. For example, these only are hypothetical examples. Now, my supplier had filed GSTR number 1 using my GST. I mean to say he has given the credit for me using my GST number. Now, the same credit is appearing in my login in GSTR 2A and 2B. But I did not file the GST returns. That means I filed the GST returns by taking excess input credit. Like for example, as I told, my supplier gave me a credit of only 2,000, but I took a credit of 5,000. Now this is where you are trying to evade the tax by claiming more amount of input tax credit, which is not correct. To bend or tighten the screws of the taxpayer, because generally we Indians, with all due respects to our nation, we generally try to evade the tax instead of following the law. So what happens is, in order to tighten the screws of the taxpayers, recently from 1st January 2021 as well as from 1st January 2022, both the dates I'm saying, it is purposefully I'm saying that these two dates. With effect from 1st January 2021, the GST department had put some restrictions on availing input tax credit. So they told the input tax credit will be available only till the amount which is mentioned in GSTR 2A and 2B. For the amount which is not mentioned in GSTR 2B, we will give you input tax credit only up to 5% of that. 5% of the available credit. This is what the GST department made an announcement with a notification on 1st January 2021. But later on, they found it very difficult. And then they also brought in one new concept with effect from 1st January 2022, saying that from 1st January 2022, no taxpayer shall be allowed the amount of input tax credit unless it is appearing in GSTR 2B. Very clearly they have given. Now, some students might be wondering, what is the difference between 2A and 2B? Now, the basic difference between 2A and 2B is 2A is a dynamic form. It keeps on changing. Whereas 2B is a static form. Static means it doesn't change. That is the reason why the government has told no taxpayer shall be allowed the amount of credit unless and until it is mentioned in GSTR 2B. So from 1st January 2022, no question of availing even that 5% provisional credits also. So it is always what is appearing in GSTR 2B, only that much amount of credit you have to avail. Now, while doing this, the taxpayers are facing certain difficulty. What is the difficulty is they would have purchased goods from their suppliers. They would have made the payment also to the suppliers. They have the proof of payment also with the suppliers. But the supplier did not file GSTR number 1. Because of that much amount of input tax credit is not appearing or reflecting in GSTR 2B of your clients. Now, what they have to do? Is it their mistake? It is literally not their mistake, because from their angle, they have already paid the tax. They are having the proof. They have the tax invoice. They have received the goods, everything. All the conditions mentioned in section 16 of the CGST Act 2017 have been fulfilled. But still, is it their mistake? Answer is no. That is the reason now the government has shouldered the responsibility on the recipient. That is our clients. What is the responsibility? They have to follow up with their suppliers and they have to ask the suppliers to file GST returns. Otherwise, no credit will be available to the recipient, is what the government has told very, very clearly with effect from 1st January 2022. So, my dear students, if at all you are filing already into the process of filing GST returns, please don't avail the credit which is not appearing in GSTR 2B. Please go as per the credit which is appearing in GSTR 2B only. Else, tomorrow there will be a mismatch in the amount of credit you avail and the amount of credit which is reflecting in GSTR 2B. Yes, this will make more amount of work for us, but it is not avoidable. It is inevitable. You have to do this work. For that, I suggest you increase your fees by 10%. There is no problem at all, because the work has increased. You have to charge no free of cost service for anyone whatsoever. So this is your introduction to GST returns. Now let us go to the types of GST returns. Now before we look into the types, I want to tell you something. After the introduction of because you should have knowledge of all these things. That's the reason I want to mention. Because these and all, the table and all, whatever I mentioned, if you give a plain reading, you will easily understand. That's not a problem. You should also know as a professional what happened in the past, what happened at a later stage. So that is the reason I'm mentioning this point. So initially, after introduction of GST in 2017, the government told 11 returns are there in GST. So government has just made a plain statement saying in GST you have to file 11 returns. Now this statement was misinterpreted in the parliament, especially by the opposition, and they started influencing the trading organization, traders, businessmen, saying that GST is a complicated law. GST, in GST, you have to file 11 returns, but in the erstwhile VAT and all, only 1 or 2 returns was sufficient, and BJP government is making this complicated. That is the reason the leader of opposition, Sri Rahul Gandhi ji, he told this GST is a Gabbar Singh tax. Now, this is the word what he has made. It is not goods and service tax, it is a Gabbar Singh tax. After listening so much to the opposition, then the ruling party, obviously headed by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, he only had made a statement saying that opposition have been telling that 11 returns are there, but I think they haven't gone through the returns properly. All taxpayers need not file all 11 returns. Very clearly, he has made the statement. And then he told the purpose of introducing GST itself is to make the process simplified. Then why will we make a taxpayer to file GSTR 11 returns? I mean to say GSTR returns, which are 11. You have to understand that it is not a Gabbar Singh tax. It is in fact a good and simplified tax. This is the statement made by Narendra Modi in the parliament whenever this bill was passed and all. So it is also called as a good and simple tax. Now, by saying that, he told we are giving you a clear picture of GST returns. So as per that statement and as per the understanding of CGST Act 2017, we as a professionals at least should not get carried away by those words, because your clients tomorrow also might come and ask you these things, because the clients, with all due respects to them, the clients, what they do is they do Google and come to us. Nowadays, no one is coming with a blank knowledge. They are coming with knowledge which is half knowledge, or I can say Google knowledge. Now, when they do, they'll say how many returns are there in GST. Obviously, Google will give an answer 11. Now, they will be shocked by looking at that, and they'll come to us, sir, 11 returns we have to file, sir. Is it mandatory, sir? I'll better cancel my registration, sir. These kind of things they are bringing into picture. So please understand, for different taxpayers, different returns are applicable. All 11 returns are not applicable to every taxpayer is what you should know. So once you are registered under GST, that does not mean you have to file all the 11 returns. So if you just go through the types of returns, I have given you GSTR number 1, 2, and 3. Firstly, I'll discuss about GSTR 1, 2, and 3 because this GSTR 1, 2, and 3 are applicable for a regular taxpayer. Now, when I say they are applicable to a regular taxpayer, who is a regular taxpayer? A taxpayer who has not opted for composition scheme, a taxpayer who is not a casual taxpayer, a taxpayer who is not an e-commerce operator, a taxpayer who is not a input service distributor, a taxpayer who is not mandatorily required to required to file GSTR 1, 2, 3, rather who is required to deduct TDS mandatorily under section 51 and collect TCS under section 52. In short, the e-commerce operators. So a regular taxpayer does not means a person who is not falling under these categories. For them, GSTR 1, 2, and 3 will be applicable. Now, when it comes to GSTR 1, GSTR 1 purely talks about furnishing the details of outward supplies. Nothing but, in short, your sales or services in a particular month. This is what GSTR 1 talks about, and it has to be filed by 10th of next month. Now, with regard to this GSTR number 1, I have some more points to be discussed that we will come in the, in the coming slides, we will be discussing all those points. However, as of now, I am only giving you the types of returns. The details of the types of returns and all, we will give at a later stage. Then comes here GSTR number 2. Now, when it comes to GSTR number 2, strictly speaking, there is no GSTR 2 implemented by the government till date, because it was getting practically difficult for the government to introduce this GSTR 2. That is why they kept GSTR 2 on hold and they started introducing GSTR 2A. and GSTR 2B. So you have to be careful. GSTR 2A and 2B, you need not do anything. It is only for viewing purposes. It is an automatically system generated one. So you as a taxpayer, you need not do anything in GSTR 2. So one return has already gone. So where is the question of 11 returns? So this itself proves that the statements made in the parliament is not correct. Then comes your GSTR number 3. Now it talks about monthly returns by the regular taxpayer. When I say monthly returns, it means in a particular month, what is your amount of outward supplies? What is the amount of inward supplies? What is the tax on outward supplies? What is the tax on inward supplies? You have to consider these factors and then you have to arrive at the balance GST payable for a particular month. So in case the outward supplies or the tax on outward supplies in a particular month is 8,000 and the tax on inward supplies, when I say inward supplies, simple my dear, it is purchases I'm talking about. So the tax on inward supplies is, say, for example, 6,000. So outward supplies tax or output tax 8,000, input tax 6,000, the balance 2,000 is the GST which is payable. So that 2,000 rupees you have to pay while filing GSTR number 3B. Now there is no GSTR 3. Please understand, GSTR 3A is there, 3B is there, but GSTR 3A is only a notice which will be given by the GST department. So we needn't worry about 3A. It is only GSTR 3B what we have to file on a monthly basis if we are a regular taxpayer. Now, in this GSTR 3B itself, I gave one situation where output tax is more and input tax is less. So 8,000 minus 6,000 balance 2,000 rupees is what you have to pay. What if it is the reverse? I mean to say output tax is only 6,000 whereas input tax credit is 8,000. That means you have more amount of credit. So what will happen? Always the amount of input tax credit will go and sit in one ledger called electronic credit ledger. Now from that ledger, whatever amount of output tax is there, it will get set off. And the balance of 2,000, whatever I told, will be still lying in the electronic credit ledger, which can be used to pay output tax in the next month. And one important point I want to tell you here, since I took the topic of electronic credit ledger, I want to mention one point here. The amount which is lying in the electronic credit ledger can be used only to pay output tax, not late fee, not interest, not penalty. So please be careful. Don't unnecessarily fight with the department saying, I already have the amount of tax in my electronic credit ledger. Please use that to pay this late fee or penalty. Sorry, only the amount which is lying in the electronic credit ledger can be used only to pay output taxes, not late fee, not interest. So this point you have to be careful. So there are other two ledgers also in our GST portal called as electronic cash ledger and electronic liability ledger. Always remember, when you are filing the GST returns, the electronic liability ledger should become nil. Then only you will be able to file the GST returns. Otherwise, you will not be able to file the GST returns at all. So that point you have to be very, very careful with. Then electronic cash ledger, whatever tax you paid, first it will go and get credited in the electronic cash ledger. Later, when you are setting off, as I told, the liability ledger should become nil. The amount of tax which you paid is sitting in the electronic cash ledger that will get set off with the liability ledger, making the liability ledger zero. And then only you will be able to file the GST returns on a monthly basis. This procedure is purely applicable whenever you are filing GSTR 3B, not for any other return. Please be careful and cautious. And this GSTR 3B has to be filed by 20th of next month. So in case you are filing the GST returns for the month of January, yes, now in the month of February, within 20th, you have to file GSTR 3B returns. That is the due date. Then comes your GSTR 4, which is purely applicable for composition scheme dealers. So the taxpayers who have opted for composition scheme as per section 10 of the CGST Act 2017, they can go for GSTR number 4. But to opt for composition scheme, your turnover will always matter. How much amount of turnover should be there? The amount of turnover should not exceed 1.5 crore in the previous financial year. Then only in the current financial year, you can opt for composition scheme. Otherwise, you cannot opt for composition scheme. And once you opted for composition scheme, you have to mandatorily file GSTR 4 only. And that GSTR 4 has to be filed only on an annual basis, not on monthly or not on quarterly basis. It is an annual return. Please understand, it is apart from GSTR number 9. So GSTR 9 which is an annual return, will not be applicable for composition taxpayers because already GSTR 4 is applicable to them. So what is the due date for filing GSTR number 4? That also I have mentioned here, 30th April of the next financial year is what will be the due date. So say for example, we are in 2022-23 financial year. During 2022-23 financial year, if we had any clients who have opted for composition scheme, such clients, you have to make them file GSTR number 4 on or before 30th of the coming financial year. April 30th of the coming financial year. That is in 2023. 30th April 2023 will be the due date to file GSTR number 4. But please wait. Filing of GSTR 4 is annual. Fine. But the government says, hello, my dear composition dealer, you have to pay the tax on a quarterly basis. You have to pay the tax on a quarterly basis because composition dealers have to pay minimal, small percentage of tax. That is 1%. Am I right? So such persons have to pay GST, the amount of GST of 1% on their outward supplies on a quarterly basis using CMP 08 Challan. CMP stands for composition 08. They have to pay. You can understand one small logic here. Government is not asking you to file GST return. Rather, it is asking you to pay the amount of GST. Now, when it comes to payment of amount of GST, you have to understand one logic of the government here. The government is least bothered about your GST return first, initially. However, the government is looking only at the amount of tax what the taxpayer is going to pay. So it is least bothered of the amount of GST. It is least bothered about the GST return. Rather, it is very much focused only on the amount of tax what you pay. So please be careful. Then comes your GSTR number 5. It talks about returns by the non-resident taxpayer. So if a non-resident wants to do the business in India, for him, GSTR 1, 2, 3 or 4 will not be applicable. Rather, GSTR number 5 will be applicable. And that has to be filed within 20 days from the end of the month or within 7 days after the last day of the period of registration, whichever is earlier. Now, why they say 7 days from the last day of the period of registration? Because for the non-resident taxable person or a casual taxable person, I can say the registration validity, that is the GST registration validity, will not be for a period of more than 90 days. And if they want to extend further, they have to make an application and the government, if it is satisfied, they will allow extension of that validity of registration. Otherwise, no. So for them, they have to file the GST return within 20 days of the next month or within 7 days from the last day of the registration, whichever is earlier. So you have to be careful with that. Then comes your GSTR number 6. It is purely about returns by input service distributor. Now, first we should know who is an input service distributor. Input service distributor is a person who distributes the credit among different departments in an organization. Like for example, take a case of a manufacturing company, Hindustan Unilever Limited. Now, Hindustan Unilever Limited, it is having manufacturing division. It is also having marketing division. Now, Hindustan Unilever Limited had given an advertisement in a television channel for promotion of its products. Now the television channel has raised a bill to Hindustan Unilever Limited. Say for example, the bill value was 10 lakhs and the amount of GST on that was 18%, which comes to 1,80,000. CGST being 90,000, SGST being another 90,000. Now, this amount of 1,80,000, Hindustan Unilever Limited will distribute it among the manufacturing division and the marketing division. Why, sir? Why it should divide? Because had the manufacturing division not manufactured the products, the marketing division couldn't have marketed the product. Had marketing division not marketed the product, the manufacturing division couldn't have manufactured the product. So since both are interlinked to each other, what Hindustan Unilever Limited will do is it will distribute the credit between manufacturing division and the marketing division. Now when it is dividing, it should divide it only based on a document. Without a document, it cannot do the same. And once it has divided, it's apportioned the credit between the marketing division and the manufacturing division, it also has to file a return in GSTR number 6, that is within 13th of next month. Then comes your GSTR number 7. As I told, GSTR 7 as well as 8 will be applicable purely for electronic commerce operators. Of course, GSTR 7 will be applicable for others also, like government departments who generally deduct TDS in GST. TDS not in income tax, TDS in GST before they make the payment to the contractors, government contractors. So such people have to file GSTR number 7, that is within 10th of next month. Similarly, GSTR number 8 is applicable purely for electronic commerce operators who collect TCS, like Amazon, Flipkart, Zomato, Swiggy, all these people, that is within 10th of next month. Now comes the dangerous one, GSTR number 9, which is your annual return. This annual return mandatorily has to be filed by all the taxpayers except those opting for composition scheme. That is the reason I told you just now when I was discussing about composition scheme, GSTR number 4 will, for those who opted for composition scheme, GSTR number 9 will not be applicable. And this GSTR number 9 has to be filed on or before 31st December of the next financial year. So this date of 31st December, I think going forward will become of very much importance, because we are anticipating that the government wants to change the calendar year from, financial year from April to March to January to December. So this is what we are having some information, but we don't know. However, when you take the due date of income tax return earlier assessment year 22-23, the income tax department was very stringent. They did not give time till 31st of March. They told the due date will be maximum 31st of December. So that there also they are restricting the time to 31st December. Here also they have put a time till 31st of December. So I think they are giving an hint that we will be changing the financial year from January to January to December. This is only a thinking in my mind, having got nothing to do with the government's proposal. Okay, then comes your GSTR 10 final return. Now, many of them have a doubt. Sir, what is this annual return? What is this final return? What is basically the difference between annual return and a final return? This kind of doubt is there with many of them. So please be careful. At least as a tax professionals or a chartered accountant students, we at least should have the knowledge. Final return means a return which has to be filed once your registration is cancelled. Once your registration is cancelled, you have to file the GSTR number 10, which is nothing but your final return. And that final return has to be filed within 3 months from the date of order of cancellation or from the date of cancellation, whichever is earlier. So you have to be careful. Final return is not similar to annual return. And final return will not be applicable unless and until you have gone for cancellation. So please, for God's sake, please be careful with all these things. Then comes your GSTR number 11, government bodies and United Nations. They have to file within GSTR 11 within 28th of next month. However, if the government body also has deducted TDS, then apart from GSTR 11, GSTR number 7 also will be applicable. So you have to be very cautious if at all you get a client who is a government department. So these all will be applicable. Then quickly, let us go through what are the things which are there in GSTR 1, 2, 2A, I mean to say 3 and all. So the return, that is section 37 deals with this one. The return of outward supply should be furnished by every registered taxable person. That means GSTR 1. Except the following persons. Except. So input service distributor. Why he need not file? Because for him GSTR number 6 is applicable. A non-resident taxable person. Why? Because GSTR 5 is applicable. A person paying tax under composition scheme. GSTR 4 is applicable. A person paying tax under section 51. GSTR 7 is applicable. A person paying tax under section 52. GSTR 8 is applicable. A supplier of online information and database access and retrieval. For them GSTR 11 will be applicable. So this is the reason why for these people GSTR number 1 is not applicable. This is the point I was telling you in a summarized manner before I started with all these points. Now, what all the details should contain? Please see, the details of outward supply shall be furnished in GSTR 1, which shall include the details of invoices, debit notes, credit notes, and revised invoices issued in relation to outward supplies. When I say revised invoices, it means some amendments what you are making to outward supplies which you already made. So that is called as revised invoices issued in relation to outward supplies. Then such a return shall be filed by the taxpayer during a tax period for supply of goods or services or both, definitely, and the registered person shall not be able to file the return between 11th to 15th day of succeeding month. Why? Because the due date was 10th, number one. Secondly, during 11th to 15th, once a person, that is your supplier, has filed GSTR 1 before 10th, that information will be transmitted into GSTR 2A and 2B between 11th and 15th. That is why they say between 11th and 15th, you cannot file GSTR number 1. Of course, unless and until the time extension has been granted. I mean to say the due date has been extended. Now comes your very important one, which was not introduced till last month, my dear. In case of late filing of GSTR 1, the person shall pay a sum of 100 for every day of default subjected to a maximum of 5,000 rupees. Now till today, we did not receive any notices from the government for delayed filing of GST returns. We did not file. We did not receive any notices from the GST department for delayed filing of GST returns, especially GSTR number 1. So when you are filing GSTR number 1 from now onwards, every day there will be a penalty, and that has to be paid while filing your GSTR 3B. They are trying to consolidate both the things. And that is why new forms and all are coming into picture. Like GST RET1, RET2, RET3, these all they are introducing slowly in a phased manner. Then, as I told, the due date may be extended by the commissioner by recording the reasons in writing. The commissioner last 2 years back, you know very well, COVID was there. Because of COVID and all, many due dates got extended. But they extended only by passing it by way of giving reasons why they are extending. All these points they have already mentioned. Then the details of outward supply, very, very important. This is the point I was telling you from long time. The details of outward supplies for a month furnished by the supplier are made available to the recipient in GSTR 2A or 4A for composition scheme. Because 4A, for those who opted for composition scheme, for them the details of supplies will be made available in 4A. For regular taxpayers, it will be made available in 2A. Then whatever is eligible credit will be appearing in GSTR 2B. Then the recipient. Now this point, actually earlier it was there. The recipient is provided an opportunity to add, correct or delete such details in a two-way communication process. Now this point purposefully have still kept it here because you should also know what happened earlier. Earlier when they told GSTR 1, 2 and 3 are applicable, the recipient had to file GSTR2 within 15th of next month. Now, while filing GSTR2, he was earlier given an option of adding or modifying or deleting any kind of invoice, and whatever additions or modifications or deletions he made, it will be given to, the information will be sent to the GSTR number 1 supplier. That is the supplier who filed GSTR number 1. So that is why we mentioned there called two-way communication. Two-way means what the recipient is doing, it will be communicated to supplier. What supplier is doing, it will be communicated to the recipient. That is what you have to be careful. After such modifications, recipient files, recipient files the details of inward supplies in GSTR2 by 15th of that month. So this was the actual procedure now, original procedure. But now since GSTR2A and 2B have come, that is this GSTR2 is not applicable, which I have already mentioned. Then the details of invoices added, corrected or deleted are made available to supplier. This is the point I was telling you in form number GSTR 1A. Now that this is not applicable at all, so we'll slightly skip this and go forward. And the last point also will not be applicable. We'll slightly skip. Now, in case any error or omission is discovered in the course of matching, rectification of the same shall be effected, and tax and interest, if any, shall be paid on such corrections by the person responsible for filing the return. So when you are doing that matching and all, earlier, now it is not applicable, but still earlier when GSTR 1 and GSTR 2 were matched, yes, that matching process was there. During that process, if you come across any excess tax, you have to pay along with interest. If you come across less tax, that amount will come and sit in your electronic credit ledger. This was the procedure earlier, but now it is not applicable. Then next comes, the registered person is required to furnish the following details of outward supplies in GSTR 1 in the following manner. Very, very important. Actually, this slide question also was being asked in CA exam, CA inter exam especially. When is a person required to give consolidated invoice? When is a person required to give invoice-wise details? This question was asked in one of the CA exam. I don't remember the year. I think it is in 2019, if I'm not wrong, May exam, I think. So they asked this question for 4 marks, solid 4 marks they asked. So let us see quickly. Invoice-wise details of interstate and intrastate supplies made to registered person must be given. So you cannot give consolidated details. Every invoice-wise details you have to mention. So invoice-wise details of what all interstate and intrastate supplies were made to registered person you have to mention. Similarly, invoice-wise details of interstate supplies made to unregistered persons with invoice value of more than rupees 2,50,000. So if you are making any supplies to unregistered person, like for example, you have a provisional store where many unregistered suppliers, that is nothing but a customers comes to your shop. In case to any of the customer, like for example, they have a big function going at their home. So they have bought groceries worth more than 2,50,000. Yes. Then you have to give invoice wise details. Otherwise, it is not required. But that is also required only if it is an interstate supply, not a intrastate. So to get a difference between intra and interstate, intrastate means the supplies made within the state. So if the goods are sold within Telangana, assume, I'm just taking an example. So if the goods are sold within Telangana, then it is called intrastate. If the goods are sold from Telangana to Tamil Nadu, then it will be called as interstate. So you have to be careful with this. Then see the next third one, consolidated details of all intrastate supplies made to unregistered person. As I was telling you, you have a provisional store. There are many customers who are walking into your store. Now, when the individual customer comes to your store, you might not be able to provide invoice-wise details to the GST department. To the customer, you will provide individual bill. I'm not talking here about the customer. I'm talking about the invoice-wise details or consolidated details to be provided to the GST department. So consolidated details only you have to give to the GST department. Otherwise, it's not required. Similarly, consolidated details of all interstate supplies made to unregistered person with a value of less than 2,50,000. This fourth point is just opposite to the second point, because in the second point, if the value exceeds 2.5, you have to give invoice-wise details. If the value does not exceed invoice-wise, I would say 2,50,000, you need not give the invoice-wise details. That is what is the point here. Then comes your section 38. Actually, I'll skip this and go forward because GSTR 2 is not applicable to you. Then comes the summary of the section and the rule which is applicable for different GST returns. Like regular taxpayer has to file GSTR 3. Actually, it should be GSTR 3B by 20th of the month. Then compounding taxpayer or composition taxpayer has to file GSTR number 4 as per rule number 4, and 30th annually you have to file. Then GSTR number 7, registered person who is liable to deduct TDS, 10th of next month. Similarly, rule number 6, input service distributor, GSTR number 6. All these things we have already discussed. Now comes your extension of time limit. Now during the COVID time, as I was telling, if commissioner feels that the time limit of all these things has to be extended, yes, he will extend, but he will record the reasons in writing and then only he will extend the time limit. Then mandatory filing of returns. Now this is the point I was stressing in the beginning. Sir, I do not have any sale or purchase or any service rendered during a particular month. Should I file GST returns? Answer is yes, you have to file. Sir, what GST returns I have to file? File a nil GST return. Nil. That means say that my GST sale is 0, purchase is 0. That is why if you look into the portal, they will tell when you go to GSTR number 1 and you click on the top, once you click and go inside, on the top, it will ask you file nil GSTR 1. One small box is there. If you just click that box, all other tables will get hidden and you will directly be taken through, taken to your submit button. So that submit button, if you click, it is sufficient. Yes. So they have slowly made it very simple. Earlier, it was not like that. I mean to say at the time of introduction in 2017 till 18, we faced little difficulty, practical difficulty, but from 2019 they have made 2020, I should say, they have brought in all these small changes and they have taken good decisions in the GST Council meet also. Then rectification of returns on payment of interest. This point also just now we have covered. So any omission or any deletion what has happened, because of that, if any tax has increased, then you have to pay the tax along with interest. And that interest will be at the rate of 18% per annum, which is nothing but coming to 1.5% per month. Now comes your non-furnishing of previous tax period return. Very, 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 very important. I'll tell you just recent changes which has happened. Earlier, prior to September, I can say, if at all, you did not file GSTR number 1 of August, still you can file GSTR number 1 of September. That means previous tax period GSTR 1, if you didn't file, the next tax period GSTR 1 you can file directly. There was no restriction. The restriction was there only if you didn't file GSTR number 3B of August. Because of that, you cannot file GSTR 3B of September. The logic was, why you cannot file GSTR 3B of September, leaving GSTR 3B of August? The logic was very simple. As I was telling you just now, if at all any excess credit was there, carrying forward the credit will become very difficult. I mean to say the amount of credit will not go and sit in the electronic credit ledger unless you file the GST returns. That is why they have put a restriction. If you do not file GSTR 3B of August, you cannot file GSTR 3B of September. Now again, to file GSTR 3B, your supplier should have filed GSTR number 1. So in order to ensure that the suppliers are following the law, from October, what the GST department, of course, GST council in its meeting, what change it brought is, now if you do not file GSTR 1 and 3B of the previous month, you cannot file GSTR 1 of the next month. They are putting a restriction directly to GSTR 1 because restriction of 3B was already there. So now the system, that is the GST portal, will not allow you to file GSTR number 1. Say for example, November GST returns you did not file. You want to file December month GST returns. The system will not allow you to do so because there is one more chain link. What is that link? Just now we discussed. in this slide. Nil return has to be filed. Whether you have rendered services or supplied goods or not, also you have to file nil return. So with this, if you go and slightly connect here, you will understand this point. So without filing GSTR 1 and 3B of the earlier tax period, you cannot file GSTR 1 of the current tax period. That does not mean you can file GSTR 3B. When you are filing GSTR 3B, again it will give an error. GSTR 1 is not filed. Ensure that it is filed and then come and file this. So they have everything, tightened the screws of the taxpayer. Then comes your furnishing of returns by persons liable to deduct TDS. This is nothing but your GSTR number 7. As I told earlier also, I have given the due date. Within 10 days, you have to file the GSTR 7 returns. For that, the information will be available to them, to the recipient in GSTR number 2A. Then comes your composition scheme. Now, before we go to the returns of the composition taxpayer, let me quickly, since time is available, let me quickly tell you about the certain features of composition scheme so that it will become helpful for you. Section 10 of the CGST Act deals with the composition scheme, wherein it says a person whose turnover does not exceed 1.5 crore. Of course, it is 75 lakhs in some 8 special category states like Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, etc. There, if you are a composition taxpayer, your turnover should not exceed 1.5 crore or 75 lakhs as said earlier. But if you want to opt in for the composition scheme, please be careful. You can opt in for the composition scheme only at the beginning of the financial year. You cannot opt in for the composition scheme in the middle of the financial year. So recently a change has come in the GST portal. They have mentioned that also very clearly. Now, when I say recently, it is a day back. That is yesterday. There is a change which has come in the GST portal saying if a person wants to opt for composition scheme for financial year 2023-24, they have to select their option on or before 30th March 2023. Yes, what you heard is correct. Instead of 31st March, they have made it 30th March 2023. So before that 30th March 2023, if at all any of your clients wants to go for a composition scheme in the coming period, coming financial year, please ensure they opt for the scheme on or before this date, 30th March 2023, because opting in for composition scheme has to be done at the beginning of the year, not in the middle of the year. Now, say for example, a person opted for regular scheme only in the beginning. He wants to shift for composition scheme in the middle. Can he do so? Answer is no, which I have already told you. What if it is a reverse case? A person who has opted for composition scheme in the beginning of the year, he wants to shift back to regular scheme in the middle of the year. Can he do so? Answer is very much yes. So coming from regular to composition in the middle of the year is not allowed. Whereas coming from composition to regular in the middle of the year, yes, it is very much allowed. The reason is very simple. The government will get more money if they allow you to shift from composition to regular scheme. But if you are shifting from regular to composition, definitely government is going to lose the revenue. So that is a main reason or logical reason I can say why the shifting is not allowed from composition to regular. From regular to composition in the middle of the year. But shifting of composition to regular in the middle of the year, yes, it is very much welcomed. And the person who has opted for composition scheme, you know very well, he will not be eligible to avail any input tax credit. Similarly, he should not charge any tax on the invoices on sale made by him to his customers. Why? Because straight away he only has to pay 1% of the output tax supplies if he is a trader or a manufacturer. If he is a restaurant service provider, you know very well, it is 5%. Then comes your next important issue. If at all he shifts from regular to composition scheme composition to regular scheme in the middle of the year, then since he was in composition scheme earlier, he was not eligible to avail input tax credit. Now, since he shifted from composition to regular, he can avail the input tax credit again on what all purchases he made earlier. Now he can avail back the input tax credit. And if a person was there in composition and came back to regular, like for example, a person was there from April 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022 in composition scheme. and he has opted out for regular scheme on 1st January 2023. Now what happens here? Please observe logically. Such person has to file GSTR number 4. He has to file GSTR number 4 for the period April to December, not April to March. Why? Because on 1st January, he has come back to regular scheme. So he can't go for GSTR 4 from April to March. Rather, the information or the sales or purchase, whatever he made during April to December only, he has to file GSTR number 4, because from January onwards, he will not be eligible to file GSTR number 4. Rather, he has to come to GSTR number 1 and GSTR 3B. So both the returns he has to file in this year. From next year, he will not be required to file GSTR 4 annually. Directly, he will be filing monthly returns. This point also is very, 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 very important. So let us see form and manner quickly of submission of return by composition supplier. The registered person paying tax under composition scheme shall furnish, number 1, a statement containing details of tax paid for every quarter by 18th of succeeding month. Please understand, it is quarterly once. That is, I was telling you CMP 08. So quarterly once only you have to do, but the quarterly also the due date is 18th. Then he has to file the return in GSTR number 4 on an annual basis on or before 30th April of the succeeding financial year. This also we have discussed. Then this shall be prepared based on the information which is available in GSTR 4A in the portal. This also we have mentioned. Now the return furnished shall include what all? Invoice wise, interstate and intrastate inward supplies received from registered and unregistered person. That is details of purchases. Import of goods and services. Consolidated details of outward supplies made, because for composition, you need not have invoice wise. It is always consolidated because it is the supplier only who is going to pay 1%. Lastly, debit and credit notes issued and received. Now, see, this is the point I was telling you. If you were there till the middle of the year in the composition scheme, then you shifted to regular. Then you have to file 2 returns I was telling you. So let us see quickly. Let us read out the lines quickly. What is there here? The registered person who opts to withdraw from the composition scheme or notification, it is not, or notification number 2/2019 shall furnish a statement in the prescribed form for the period for which he has paid tax under composition scheme till 18th day of the succeeding month of the quarter in which the date of withdrawal falls or cessation takes place, and shall furnish GSTR 4 for the said period by 30th of April. This is the point I was telling. A person was there in composition scheme from April to December, and from January he shifted to a regular scheme. So what he has to do, he has to file GSTR 4 for the period April to December, not April to March. This is the point I was telling you very clearly. Then comes returns by input service distributor. Every input service distributor shall furnish the return in GSTR number 6 within 13 days after the end of the month. Then GSTR 6 shall be prepared. I gave you an example also of the Hindustan Unilever Limited of manufacturing and marketing departments. Hope you remember. GSTR number 6 shall be prepared on the basis of GSTR 6A made available to him in the portal. Similarly, the form GSTR 6A shall be verified, added, corrected or deleted. Nowadays, this procedure is not applicable. Similarly, furnishing of returns by non-resident taxable person or a casual taxable person, we can say. For them, every non-resident taxable person shall furnish the return in GSTR number 5. Just now we have seen in the table within 20 days after the end of the calendar month, or within 7 days after the last day of the period of registration, whichever is earlier. This is the point I was telling you. For them, the maximum period of registration available is only 90 days. So from 90 days, within 7 days, they have to file, or within 20 days, whichever is earlier is what they are trying to tell. Then comes your next one, section 40, which deals with first return. First return means nothing but in our list and all, that first return was not there because that is not a form. It is only a what you call procedure which is mentioned by the government. First return means when you are filing the return for the very first time. So say for example, you got registered on you made an application for registration on 1st of February. You got the registration on, say, for example, 5th February. Now, you would have made some purchases and sales during 1st and 5th. Now, what law says is, since you are filing the return for the first time in your lifetime, that is GST return, what all details you or purchases or sales you made during 1st to 5th, you have to mention them also. Because what all sales or purchase you made from 5th, by default, you will mention. But what about the details of supplies made during that period? That also you have to mention. So that is what is there here. See there, every registered person who has made outward supplies in the period between the date on which he became liable to registration till the date on which registration is granted shall declare the same in the first return furnished by him after the grant of registration. Then, very, 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 very important scheme, QRMP scheme, which has come into force with effect from 1st January 2021. It is called quarterly return but monthly payment. Now, who can opt for this scheme? Every taxpayer whose turnover in the preceding financial year does not exceed 5 crore. Yes, that person can go for QRMP scheme. That is, this is a simplified procedure which has been brought in by the GST Council, saying that those taxpayers below 5 crores will be treated as small taxpayers, and for them, in order to keep them, or give them some flexibility, we are going to introduce one scheme called quarterly return monthly payment. So what do you mean by quarterly return? Unlike our GSTR number 1, which has to be filed on a monthly basis, you need not file here the GST returns on a monthly basis, GSTR 1 on a monthly basis, rather on a quarterly basis. Every quarter once if you file, it is more than enough. This will help the taxpayers to reduce their burden of expenditure or burden of fees, what they are paying to chartered accountants or any other tax professionals in the market. So, with an intention of reducing all such things, this QRMP scheme has been introduced. But to avail this QRMP scheme, you have to be mandatorily in within the turnover of 5 crore. Now, you can, and it is only an optional one. It is not a mandatory one. If your turnover is below 5 crore also, if you want to file monthly, no problem. The law does not say anything. So it is not mandatory to opt for this QRMP scheme. So once you have opted, GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B, you have to file quarterly only. And this scheme is only for those who are regular taxpayers, not composition, because for composition by default it is quarterly, and not for any other taxpayers. Similarly, this scheme is GST wise, which means distinct persons can avail QRMP scheme for one and regular scheme for others. Now comes the meaning of distinct persons. Who is a distinct person? Distinct person means, say for example, we are having office, Srinath and Associate Chartered Accountants are having an office in Hyderabad. We also have one more office in Chennai. Now, with regard to both these offices, since we have obtained registration for Hyderabad branch separately, Chennai branch also separately, what basically happens is Hyderabad branch and Chennai branch will be seen as two different persons. Why? Because the GST number is changing. So definitely they will see us as a two different persons. That's why we are called as distinct persons. Now here, if Hyderabad branch has opted for regular scheme and Chennai branch has opted for quarterly scheme, I'm going to say QRMP scheme, it is very much accepted. There is no problem at all. So this flexibility is not available in composition taxpayers. For composition taxpayers, if I have 2 units, I opted for composition in one, I have to opt for composition in others also. I can't be in regular scheme for other units. So that is what is very, very important here. Similarly, all returns pending as on the date of opting for the scheme must be filed. See, now one more link to tighten the screws of the taxpayer. They have told, unless and until you file all the returns, all pending returns, you will not be eligible to go for what? QRMP scheme. Similarly, option to continue for this has to be once option is exercised, it will definitely continue unless and until it is withdrawn. So once you go for QRMP scheme, mandatorily next year also it will continue in QRMP. unless until you come out of that and opt for regular tax pay. Now, a registered person intending to opt for the scheme shall indicate his preferences for furnishing the return on a quarterly basis from which day? First day of the second month of the preceding quarter. First day of the second month of the preceding quarter till last day of the first month of the quarter for which option is exercised. Now, what does it say? Say April, May, June was one quarter. Now in July, I want to opt for a QRMP scheme. Now, what can I do? I can opt for this from first day of second month of the preceding quarter. First day of second month of the preceding. What was second day of the preceding quarter? May. April, May, June was the first quarter. I'm in second quarter now. But preceding quarter was what? April, May and June. In that second month, that is your first May. So from first day of May till, he says, till last day of the first month of the quarter for which the option is exercised. Last day of the first month of the quarter. So now for which quarter I am exercising this scheme? Second quarter. Last day of the first month. Last day of the first month, nothing but 31st July. That is the first month in the second quarter, no? In which I am opting for QRMP scheme. So within 1st May till 31st of July, I have to exercise the option if at all I want to go for QRMP scheme in the second quarter. If I did not exercise this option till 31st of July, I cannot go for QRMP scheme in the second quarter. Again, in third quarter, if I want to go, then from 1st August, preceding quarter, from 1st August. That's how you have to be careful. Similarly, if you want to come out of the scheme, when you can come out, he can opt out of the scheme from first day of second month of the preceding quarter, again, till the last day of the first month of the quarter. Same thing he is saying. So opt in or opt out, this logic you have to apply. Similarly, the taxpayers opting for QRMP scheme shall furnish the details of outward supplies for first and second month of the quarter using IFF, nothing but invoice furnishing facility. For the last month, the invoices shall be uploaded in GSTR 1 only. Now here, a big confusion is there. Say for example, I am already in QRMP scheme, okay, and we are in February month. So January, February and March is the last quarter of our current financial year. So January and February, I have to upload January invoice in IFF, that is invoice furnishing facility. February invoices also in IFF only. When it comes to March invoice, I have to upload them in GSTR 1 because IFF will not be applicable for March. And while filing GSTR number 1 for the month of March, you should not include the invoices of January and February because you have already filed IFF. And invoice furnishing facility is only an optional one. It is not mandatory. So in case January month and February month invoices you did not upload in IFF, then in the month of March, when you are filing GSTR number 1, you have to upload the invoices of January, February and March. So please understand, I gave you two situations. Situation number 1, you uploaded the January invoices using IFF in January, uploaded the February invoices using IFF in February. In such case, March month invoice alone must be entered in GSTR number 1. Whereas second situation I told, you did not upload you did not use IFF facility for January as well as for February. Then what you have to do, the January invoice, February invoice, March invoice, all these invoices should be entered in March when you are filing GSTR number 1. This is the concept what he is saying. And as I told, furnishing details in IFF is only optional, but if it is used, the recipient will be able to avail. The recipient will be able to avail ITC as the invoices shall be reflected in 2A, 2B, 4A and 6A. Then invoices up to a value of rupees 50 lakhs only can be uploaded in IFF. So if invoice is exceeding 50 lakhs, then you have to go for a regular scheme only. Similarly, invoices can be furnished in IFF between 1st and 13th days. Now please see, the due dates are changing. If you are filing GSTR number 1, the due date is only 10th. But if you are filing IFF, the due date is still 13th. That concept you have to observe. So IFF can be filed till 13th of the next month, but GSTR 1 can be filed only within 10th of the next month. Then in IFF, the invoices can be uploaded, but what invoices can be uploaded? Only B2B. What do you mean by B2B? Business to business. But if it is business to customer, you cannot. So if Srinath and Associates is buying some furniture from Furniture Mart, so it is a B2B transaction. This can be uploaded in IFF. But if Srinath and Associates is purchasing some chairs from an unregistered person, now it is a B2C, then what will happen? That you cannot enter at all. So only B2B, nothing but business to business only has to be entered. Similarly, if IFF is not used, this is the point I was telling, the taxpayer has to upload invoices of all the 3 months in GSTR number 1. I gave you an example. A registered person is not allowed to submit details in GSTR 1 if he has not furnished GSTR 3B for last 2 months. This has obviously changed now. I have already told last month 3B itself, if you don't file this month, GSTR 1 will not be available. So no question of now 2 months. A registered person opting for QRMP scheme is not allowed to submit IFF if he has not submitted GSTR 3B of the preceding tax period. So for them also they are putting the restriction. Similarly, a registered person who is bound to discharge 1% of the tax liability in cash. Now, there is one rule called 86B. 86B says, if at all your amount of tax liability exceeds 10 lakhs, you have to disclose 1% through cash. That means you cannot disclose everything through electronic credit ledger. 1% of the tax value you have to mandatorily pay in cash. That is 99% only can be through ITC. 1% mandatory should be through cash. So what happens when that 1% is through cash? For such people, they will be allowed to submit the details only in GSTR 1, not in IFF facility. That's what they're saying. Then this 2A and 2B, it is not applicable right now. So that we need not discuss. Then comes your GSTR 3B. 3B has to be filed obviously electronically in case supplier opting for QRMP. 3B also shall be filed quarterly basis. All points we have discussed. In case of supplier not opting for QRMP scheme, GSTR 3B shall be filed on a monthly basis. Then persons required to file GSTR 3B shall pay the tax liability before submission. So many of our clients come and ask us, sir, you file a GST return, sir. We'll pay tax next month, sir. You cannot do that unless and until taxes are paid fully. GST 3B cannot be filed because when you are filing GSTR 3B, there is one option called make a payment or set off of liability. So if you click that button, if amount of output tax is available in electronic credit ledger, it will say all liabilities are set off. Now you can proceed to file the return. If the amount of input available in electronic credit ledger is not sufficient to set off the output, it will automatically take you to the next screen saying generate challan. Now that challan has to be generated and the tax has to be paid. That amount will come and sit in the electronic cash ledger. Because once you pay the tax, it sits in the cash ledger. Automatically liability ledger will get nil once you set off this liability, which I have already told. Then persons opting for QRMP scheme shall pay the tax for first 2 months of the quarter using GST PMT 06. PMT means payment after giving effect to the ITC available. So what is he saying? In QRMP scheme, if at all there is any tax, because QRMP means quarterly return, but payment is monthly payment. So what you have to do? Take output value of a particular month, see the tax on that output called output tax. See the input tax credit, subtract that input tax credit from the output tax. Whatever is the difference, please pay it off on a monthly basis. It's what it's saying. Then while paying, the taxpayer shall either select self-assessment method or fixed sum method. Either ways you can say. In case of fixed sum, only he shall pay 35% of the tax paid in the preceding quarter if the return was filed quarterly. If the return was filed on a monthly basis, then taxpayer shall pay an amount equal to tax paid in the obviously preceding month. In case of self-assessment method, what he has to do, this is the point I told just now, the taxpayer shall pay the difference between output and the input. If input is more, don't pay any tax. As simple as that, because that much amount of input will go and sit in the credit ledger. Then comes your dangerous one, annual return. Purposefully I have kept it at the end because you should also know the importance of annual return. So please understand one important point. unless and until your turnover does not exceed 2 crore in a financial year, this submission of annual return is not mandatory. Unless and until the turnover does not exceed 2 crore in a financial year, this submission of annual return in GSTR 9 is not mandatory. They have given a very clear notification for this. Apart from that, we also had something called GSTR 9C. Earlier, till 2020, we had to audit that. I mean to say a chartered accountant or a cost accountant had to give a certificate saying that the turnover is so and so, it is either matching or it is not matching or whatever qualification reports. It was mandatory for a CA or a CMA to give. But now they have done away with audits completely. No more audit by a CA or a CMA in GST. If department wants to conduct any audit, then it will give a notice to conduct the audit. Otherwise, audit will not be required. Please be careful. So GSTR 9, first condition I'm saying, GSTR 9, only if turnover exceeds 2 crore, then only GSTR 9 mandatory. If turnover exceeds 5 crore only, GSTR 9C is mandatory. So now when they are saying 9C, they are using the word called reconciliation statement. So such reconciliation statement has to be filed only if your turnover is exceeding 5 crore. Otherwise, say for example, if your turnover exceeded 2 but did not exceed 5, you have to file only GSTR number 9. 9C is not required at all. So this GSTR number 9 has to be filed by all such taxpayers who filed GSTR number 1 and GSTR number 3B. As I told, all others are not required to file annual return. And this has to be filed on or before 31st of December of the next financial year, which the due date I have already given, and in form number GST 9. However, every registered person who is required to get his books audited, actually this is not there now. I mentioned in bracket purposefully because I wanted to give you a comparison of both. If turnover exceeds 5 crores, shall furnish a copy of audited annual statement. This is not there now. That has been removed. Directly they have to submit only a reconciliation statement. That's it. Similarly, that reconciliation statement will reconcile the value of supplies declared in the return with the audited annual financial statement. Then, before that, before we go to the final return, I wanted to tell you something on GSTR number 9. Please understand, before you file GSTR number 9, please ensure that the turnover as per the books, turnover as per GSTR 1, GSTR 3B are matching. If the turnover as per GSTR 1, GSTR 9, GSTR 3B does not match, then there should be some difference. You have to provide an explanation why the difference has come into picture. The difference might be because, I'll tell you, the difference might be because last year's some invoice which you missed to take credit, you would have taken in this year. But in your books, you would have already availed in the last year. So there will be a difference in the value of ITC. Similarly, one sale invoice of the last year you did not mention in the last year. You bought it to the next year. Now that difference also will arise between the books and GSTR 1, 9 and 3B. So such a difference you should be able to explain why there is a difference of this much. So you can, when you go to GSTR 9, you have various tables. It is asking you various information. You have to study. Was it declared in the preceding financial year? The difference. Or how much amount was declared in the preceding financial year. If you enter all those things, automatically they will reconcile and they will give you the, accept your GST return. Otherwise, they'll issue a notice for which you have to give once again an explanation. So same thing happened with one of my clients. What they did is they filed a GSTR 9 of 2020-21 by showing some X amount. Actually, that in that X amount has to be adjusted for sale value of June of 2020. They filed GSTR 9 without making any adjustment, saying that our books and etc. matched, because you have to enter manually only. Whereas recently they got a notice in 2022. Just last month, I have attended the GST officer also. When they got a notice, it was very clearly evident that the sale value, what these people did, I'll tell you, in 2022 March sale, what they did is, since we paid tax extra in 2020, that amount they reduced it now, because some extra amount is lying with the government. So they did this mischievous thing, and they did not even mention the same in GSTR number 9, either of 2020 or 2021. They did not mention. Now they got a notice, and the officer says, you haven't mentioned in GSTR 9 about the adjustments what you are supposed to make. Hence, we are not responsible for the excess tax amount. If you want, you file a refund application. So we filed a refund application. Of course, it is still pending because they have to verify various facts. Then only if they are satisfied, they will grant the refund. But because of that, there is a tax liability of around 10 lakhs which has arisen. That 10 lakhs tax liability, now our client is required to pay. Why? Because that much amount of tax is what he reduced from March output liability, which is not correct. Now you might ask, how did the government know that March output tax liability is not correct? That is where they go with GSTR number 1. In GSTR number 1, you mentioned correct value of tax, not tax, I meant to say correct value of outward. Same outward value you mentioned even in GSTR 3B, but tax, you did not mention it properly. So since you reduced that amount of tax, they say the amount of tax is actually working out to so much as per GSTR 1, but in GSTR 3B, you have shown so much amount of tax as less. So please come and pay the same. So now we have applied for the refund. Of course, we have taken on humanitarian grounds some additional time. We have bargained some time from the GST department to file a refund application. We have filed it. As of now, it has not been released. So once it is released, we are ready to pay. But still, the GST department will not wait for so much of time. They are now pressurizing us to please come and pay, because it is not a small amount. It is a huge amount of 10 lakhs. Yes, so this kind of discrepancies also will come while filing GSTR number 9. That is why always match your books, your GSTR 1, which you already filed, because while filing GSTR 9, you have a summary, GSTR 1 summary, GSTR 3B summary. Download that summary. Please compare that with your books. Please see where there is a difference. Try to mention the difference in the GSTR 9 so that the department also will be aware, okay, this has happened in this year. Actually, it was supposed to happen in the earlier or the preceding financial year. So while doing this, I suggest every one of you, if you are getting confused, please talk to some other professional so that they will be able to explain you properly and guide you properly before you file the GST return. Because nowadays, every GST returns can be filed by you people without qualifying. Earlier, GSTR 9 till last year, as I told, GSTR 9 and 9C, you have to mandatorily go to a chartered accountant, or a cost accountant. But now it is not required because the audit has been done away with. It is not required at all whatsoever. So please, for God's sake, keep all these points in your mind before you get into the filing and before you submit GSTR number 9, because it will automatically change the numbers, and various notices and all might prop up in future. So to avoid such kind of notices coming in future, please go through the books of the client. Please go through the GSTR 1. Please go through GSTR 3B. Now, some people might ask, sir, what if books are not maintained? What if books are not maintained? Because as per income tax law, I opted for presumptive taxation. So I need not maintain the books, sir. But when can you go for presumptive taxation? Only when your turnover is up to 2 crore. Now, when turnover is up to 2 crore, GSTR 9 will not be applicable. Simple logic. So that way you have to introspect yourself. It is not so easy to talk whatever comes to your mouth. You have to be very cautious about the provisions in the income tax law where you will be unnecessarily caught. and you will have to, face that embarrassing situation before everyone. So please be careful before you are doing all such things. Then comes your final return. As I was telling you, the difference between annual return and final return. Final return is applicable only when you opt for cancellation. So when you don't go for cancellation, you should not file this final return. So unless and until you opted for cancellation, you please keep in mind section 45 will not be applicable for you. So please let us read out this. Every registered person whose registration has been cancelled or surrendered shall file. Please observe these two words, cancelled or surrendered. I told. Cancelled means cancellation suo motu by the government. Surrendering means you yourself voluntarily surrendering the certificate. That is, you are opting for cancellation. That's the meaning. Shall file a final return in GSTR number 10. The final return has to be filed within 3 months of what? Date of cancellation or date of order of cancellation, whichever is later. So within 3 months of that cancellation or order of cancellation, whichever is later, you have to file the final return. Then defaults in furnishing the return. So, sir, I did not file my GSTR 3B properly within time. Then what, sir? Obviously, for GSTR number 1, I have already told you 100 per day default in the beginning and maximum 5,000 rupees. Whereas if you make a default in filing GSTR 9 annual return, then there are some penalties which will be 100 per day, subject to a maximum of 0.25% of the turnover of the registered person. So let us quickly go through that. A registered person who fails to file the returns under section 39 or 44 or 45. So this purely about 39, 44 and 45 shall be served with a notice. Such notice shall require him to furnish the returns within how many days? 15 days of that notice. Then a registered person who fails to file the return under section 37, 38, 39 or 45 within the due date, he shall pay a late fee, which we have already discussed in the beginning, 100 per day of default and subject to a maximum of rupees 5,000. Lastly, if it is for annual return, in case of annual return, the delay, I mean to say if there is any delay of filing annual return, it will be 100 per day of default and or 0.25% of the turnover of the registered person, whichever is obviously higher, whichever is lower, subject to a maximum of so and so. This is what is the default if at all you do not file the returns on time. So with this, I think I have completed with my explanation of what you call the GST and all. The returns and all also we have covered to the extent possible what all are there in this GST returns. And with regard to the practical perspective, I have already taken various clients' informations and all. Even though it is not possible to show you practically how to file the returns, you have to just log into the GST portal. You should have your user ID and the password of the client. Based on that only you can get into that. So that is this is what I wanted to discuss. In case any doubts or queries are there, Bhavani ma'am is there. Bhavani ma'am, if you have any queries which have brought up to you, or personally you have some queries also, you can please post. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for such an insightful and practical oriented GST approach to filing their returns. And I'm sure that all the students must have really learned a lot on the practical aspects of filing these GST returns. So we have few questions lined up. The first question is, sir, how do we which return should we rely on for taking input tax credit, whether it is GSTR 2A or 2B?
That's what I was mentioning when I actually spoke about GSTR 2A and 2B. I told you there are two forms actually. 2A is a dynamic form, I told. 2B is a static form. And I have very clearly mentioned that government is now asking you from last 1st January 2022 to avail ITC only based on GSTR 2B, not based on GSTR 2A, because it is a static form. So based on that only you will be allowed to avail GST. ITC.
Further, another add-on question, whether RCM needs to be taken on the same month in which the RCM payment is made, or can it be deferred?
So you are talking of reverse charge mechanism, yes. Right? You can take it in the same month, because you have to take it in the same month, because that amount of reverse charge will also get added to your output tax liability. So automatically when you go to GST or 3B, it will show in one of the column reverse charge supplies. When you come to input tax credit also, in the tile or in the box, whatever we say, it will automatically get reflected. So once it will get added there, once it will get subtracted here. But only thing is the amount of what you call RCM, you cannot adjust it towards the with the balance lying in the electronic credit ledger. Rather, you have to pay it additionally in the form of cash.
One question which has come up on vendor reconciliation.
Vendor reconciliation.
Yes.
Okay.
Considering that we need to take only matched credits.
Yes.
So what will be your suggestion to students on the technical skills that they need to be equipped in order to do this, tedious work efficiently and effectively?
Correct. So basically, everything is available. Every information will be available through some of the other accounting software with our client. Only thing, we as a student, we have to be very much equipped with Excel and pivot tables, especially. If at all we are equipped with the technicalities, what we can do is we can directly, if you say, for example, if you take the case of Tally, every information you can export it in Excel. So once you export it in Excel, matching of the credits will become very easy. You can have VLOOKUP. Nowadays, Excel lookup is what they are using. So you can match the things and automatically take the credit, and you can identify it. You can also easily filter the clients who have not, or the vendors who have not uploaded their GSTR number 1, and you can directly send them the reminders to file the GSTR number 1. That is how we are getting from our various clients.
So there's always this fear that, GST returns need to be, perfectly filled. And if there are any errors, they are not rectifiable. So how do you classify these errors? As we humans tend to commit few errors. So are there any non-rectifiable errors which we need to be really cautious about while filing these GST returns? And what is the assistance that we can get from GSTN per se if we commit any such errors?
Okay. So one basic error which could not be rectifiable in the immediate month or in the future also is, very well, input tax credit, in case you have missed it availing input tax credit of a particular month, the government has given you time limit till 30th of September of the next year to avail the input tax credit. Like, for example, financial year 22-23 is there. If you have not availed ITC or you missed availing ITC of any of the invoice during 22 to 23, you have a time limit up to 30th of September. After which, whatever ITC is there, it will lapse. After which, you will not be allowed to avail any input tax rate. So this kind of error, you have to be very cautious. That's why, especially while filing the return for the month of September of the next year, we have to once go back to the earlier year, check the amount of input tax credit as per the books, check whether we have availed as per all the returns filed from April to March. If not, at least avail it now. Later on, you will not be eligible to avail the input tax credit at all. It will directly lapse. It is in fact a cost to your client. Tomorrow, he might reduce it from your fees also. So you need to be very cautious.
So there's one practical question which has come up. There's a GST cancellation which has been done. The client, ignorant of the fact that he has got a notice and he needs to respond, has now approached after the GST cancellation. So the department is asking him to file the GST returns. So yes. How is it possible to do after the cancellation of GST is the question.
No, that's what I was saying you. Earlier, straight away, the government was cancelling the GST return, but now they are putting it under suspension. Right? Now, in case, in the persons who asked the question, in their case, if really the returns, the registration got cancelled, now they have to apply to the GST officer, directly go to them, personally talk, then they will allow you to file the GST returns. Then only they will revoke the cancellation. But strictly speaking, once it is cancelled, you cannot revoke it. Yes, but however, the officers are the commissioners at their level, they can revoke it considering the reasonable grounds. Maybe humanitarian grounds, like the person got affected due to COVID and all. So they might give it a chance, and then they might allow you to file the returns.
Okay. Then another interesting question that is coming up, as you have already mentioned that, GST return filing is already simplified, but yet we hear that a new GST return system is going to come soon. But this has not been heard of late after 31st GST Council meeting. So how do we approach it? Is it going to really be implemented, or is it in the process, or should we consider that it has been scrapped off? So how likely are the GST RET1 and RET2 to come up for these return filing process?
Yeah. So any change in the GST return should happen through GST Council meet only. And in the GST Council meet, you are very much aware, all the states finance ministers are always present. And with the 2/3 majority of the strength, they are going to take a decision. But since they announced it earlier, but later on, there is no, information with regard to GST RET1 or RE2, which I was mentioning you earlier, they are going to come up. We exactly don't know in which council meeting they are going to put it up, because as you told, first of all, it is simplified procedure. Why to further complicate it is what is my question. Yes, by bringing new returns and by updating the knowledge. But on a lighter note, as a tax professionals, if something new comes to us, our fees will increase. On a lighter note, that's why I told. From customer perspective, yes, if they are filing the return on their own, it is literally going to be cumbersome for them to understand the system, because they are not technically equipped like a CA or a tax professional. That is the reason I mentioned on a lighter note, our fees are going to increase. So please don't be worried. Everything will fall in place, and whatever changes or whenever the government makes any change, it is always a welcoming opportunity for professionals like us.
So there's another question which is coming up from the students. If I have excess input tax credit that is lying in my electronic credit ledger, so am I eligible to take the refund of that credit which is on my behalf, or are there any conditions attached to it when I need to apply for the refund?
Yeah. So when you are applying for the refund, basically, you should first know why you are applying for the refund. Now, if you are continuing your business, you will not be eligible to avail the input tax credit. In case you paid tax excessively by mistake, yes, then put all the proofs and then file an application for a refund. In case you have paid excess tax, or you have suffered excess tax due to inverted duty or inverted tax structure is what we can say, then also you can apply for refund. In case you made exports after paying the tax, that refund also you can apply. But that's why I'm saying you, when you are making an application, if you go to the portal, in user services, there is an application. There's an option called in user service refund tab. In refund tab, you have an option called application for refund. When you click that, the various options, around 11 options are coming there. You can click any other option. And of course, first 10 options, if they are not applicable to you, you have the 11th option called any other. So you can select that any other, and you have to mention for what reason you are availing the input tax credit. I mean to say the refund of input tax credit. So only then they will allow you to claim. Otherwise, they will not. And if the government is satisfied only, as I told in my client's case, if they are satisfied only, they will allow me the GST input tax refund. Otherwise, they will not allow.
So there's a question from a psychological aspect or a practical approach from students, that having learned in our articleship or having practically, filing returns for our clients, what will be your suggestion, or will it be wise for us to take up these assignments independently?
See, that all depends on one's own talent. If you take my own case, when I was doing my articleship, yes, just like you people only, I too filed many income tax returns. Of course, at that time, GST returns and all was not there. I'm talking of way back in 2006. GST returns and all were not there. We did not learn anything about GST returns, but we learned many things about income tax return. Later on, from 2007, I'm telling this off the record, I have put a board outside my house called tax consultant. Then from there, we tried to get a few clients wherein we have to, apply the knowledge what we are gaining in the articleship. That is why always our institute has put a very good, the restriction of doing 3 years mandatory articleship, which is not there even in CMA course. CMA course, it is only 15 months mandatory. Whereas for our CA course only is giving this 3 years mandatory. Of course, in the new syllabus, which might come up in the near future, the articleship period is reduced to 2 years without any leave for the student. which means the intention of the institute is the student must be fully equipped. So in case you really have inbound talent to do that, you can happily take up the cases. You can happily take the help of a professional, because as I told, nowadays there is no audit also in GST. Yes. So in case the refund exceeds 2 lakhs rupees, then only it has to be signed by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant, where you can take the help of some other professionals.
Sure. So there's a situation where the client has availed credit wrongly and he realized that he needs to reverse the credit. So the question is whether this reversal can be done through the credit which is available in our electronic credit ledger, or do I need to pay it from my electronic cash ledger?
You have to pay it. You cannot reverse it. But only thing is, while you are reversing also, when you are taking that, when you are going through GST or 3B, when you are reversing it, you have to write it in as per Rule 42. There is one option provided. So in that you have to go as per rule number 42. You cannot directly say ineligible credit also. So you reverse that credit. So sometimes if you have excess balance, then the amount will get adjusted. Otherwise, it will not get adjusted.
So typically, you mean if we have excess in our credit ledger, we can reverse that?
You can. Unless and until you don't have, you cannot.
Yes. And another question. One is pertaining to GSTR 9. So whether I can take additional credit while filing my GSTR 9, which is the last option to avail credit. So do we have that option?
Okay. See, just now I was mentioning any missed credits, input tax credits, you can avail on or before 30th September of the next financial year, or on or before filing the return of, I mean to say annual return, whichever is earlier. It is not whichever is later there, it is whichever is earlier. So in case, that's why I told you before filing that September return, of course, now recently they have made it extended till 30th November. That's a different issue, but still, I'm just saying you till before you file this last return, I mean to say that November return also, I can say as of now, updated one, you have to be very, very cautious. You have to check the preceding year's financials also before you file the return for November, because while you are filing the return for November, you are filing the return of current financial year. Am I right? So you have to take the previous financial years also into consideration. Then only you have to file the November month return. Otherwise, availing credit in GSTR 9 is not possible. Excess credit, I mean to say.
So another question on the new technologies that we hear day in, day out, that is ChatGPT, which is impacting our professionals. So the question is, are these new technologies going to impact the statutory return filings? And is it wise for us to rely on those technologies while we file these returns?
Okay. So before we answer this question, I don't know how many students are aware of the full form of this GPT. Chat is okay, but what is this GPT? GPT is nothing but generative pre-trained transformer. GPT, generative pre-trained transformer, which means nothing but a person is already trained on this one. Yes. And he wants to take up some decisions. But here it is not a physical person. It is totally artificial intelligence is what they are trying to take. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, I won't say really it is going to cause some hindrance to chartered accountants, because artificial intelligence always does not understand what has to be done. Because let us take the case of adjustments made in GSTR 9. Yes. Now, how will an artificial intelligence understand what are the adjustments which are going to happen in GSTR 9? Or where I have to enter in GST, and how will an artificial intelligence understand? So please, my suggestion to all the tax professionals is, or the students is, please don't be worried just because ChatGPT has come. Because recently I have seen, I think in news yesterday or day before yesterday, ChatGPT is getting banned in many countries. It was no doubt introduced first time by a person of San Francisco, but still now even in US and even in India, just 2 days back also I have seen, I don't know how much it is correct, but even Google says that. And even in news also, they have bought this, the ChatGPT is banned as of now in India. So nothing to worry when it comes to artificial intelligence. They say artificial intelligence is going to replace humans. That can happen only in restaurants with the help of robots. It cannot happen in GSTR 9 because everything can't be input. Because if you see GST portal itself, you tell as a moderator how many glitches are there in GST portal even today.
Very true.
Now, if every glitch has been answered already, then what is the need of we professionals? The taxpayers directly they can go and file.
And
Same
also,
thing. How will the artificial intelligence address all these issues? So it's not possible. So my suggestion to all the students is please don't get worried about ChatGPT. This might be as of now useful in doing Microsoft Excel and all, but not for GST 9 returns or any other monthly returns. You need not worry about that.
And also to add on, these new technologies do not have the interpretational skills, like in order to take a credit, whether it is eligible or not. I mean, we need to typically think how much trained it needs to, take a judgment what a human does. Correct. So I think ChatGPT is not a threat to us.
100%. It's not a threat to us because as I told you, when it comes to replacing the humans, it is not so easy to replace the humans. Yes, you bring whatever technology you want. Earlier, I was interacting with one of my colleagues. What she was saying is actually her brother is preparing an audit tool, audit tool in US, where she scared me like anything that this audit tool will be replacing you, sir. Fine. I also listened to her story. She told they have designed a program like this, etc., all these things. Then I told we also have already the audit techniques and all in our institute. We have also learned in our final and all that CAAT and all is there, computer aided audit techniques, etc. But never ever we replaced is what we were replaced is what I told. Then I also asked her one small logical question. Fine. When audit tool can replace every human being, then I told her only one thing, there will be no CA-CMA course at all in our country. Simple. Why should we bother so much in studying all these courses? Why the institute should be there? Why the MCA should be there? This and all will not happen. So my suggestion to students also, don't get carried away or don't be scared just because someone is telling you something which is out of their mind. So they do not know exactly the technical aspect. So let us use some common sense while understanding certain things from the outsiders or the strangers. They will definitely scare you. You please don't get scared. We are into the respectable profession. This profession will pay us a lot of respect in the society for sure. The institute will never ever leave. That much confidence I have on my mother institute.
So there's another question. More questions are revolving on the cancellation of GST. So once if GST is cancelled suo motu by the department, so what is the approach for again, applying for the GST? And is there a process where we can apply GST on the same PAN again after cancellation?
Yes. So good question. This is GST. First of all, as I told, if it is cancelled suo motu, first of all, they have to give us a show cause notice. Now, once they give show cause notice, they'll obviously mention the time to reply. If you do not reply, they will automatically cancel the registration. This is a normal procedure executed in law. Now, if you want to again reapply for the registration, like the registration got cancelled. Now, if you want to reapply, you can happily reapply with the same PAN number. You just need to mention why you are reapplying, because already your existing registration will get propped up when you are applying for re-registration.
Okay.
I request every student to note this. When you are applying for new registration using this PAN number, there will be, after validating the PAN, mail ID, phone number, etc., immediately one error will come. Already there exists one registration with the same PAN number. Do you still want to continue new registration? Answer is yes. If you give, then you can apply for new registration. The number and all, the first 12 digits will be same. The last 3 digits will change. Because generally GST number is for 15 digits, wherein first 2 represents your state code, next 10 will represent your PAN number, last 3 will be your check digits. So first, they cannot change the first 12. Last 3, yes, they have to change because otherwise it will get contradictory in the portal itself. So they can happily apply for registration, but that does not mean just because your registration is cancelled, that is the old one is cancelled and you applied for a new one, that does not mean that you are relieved of all your liabilities of the old registration. You have to pay all the liabilities, otherwise you will be getting love letters from the department for sure. There is no chance of leaving you. Please understand, there are some of my clients who have applied for new registration in spite of we telling us. They told, "Aaya jab dekh lenge sir." Abhi aa raha, sab notices aa raha, because everything they are, the GST department and the income tax department both are exchanging the information. So please don't be blind enough in saying income tax mein bhar diya na ho gaya, so GST will not show anything. If you have showed some turnover in income tax but not in GST, there is always a chance of notice coming and sitting before you. So you need not be surprised with that.
So there's one question on GSTR 7. In GSTR 7, as you have said that GST is filed by the deductor, then how will it reflect in the recipient and in what return?
Yes, in the GSTR 2A, there are three parts actually: Part A, Part B, and Part C. In Part A, whatever purchases you made, it will get reflected. That's what in my notes also I have given. Whereas in Part B, whatever TDS or TCS credits are there, that will get reflected. So what you have to do is, when you file the return, before filing the GSTR 3B, go to Returns tab, go to TDS or TCS credit received. One option is there, TDS or TCS credit received. Once you click that, it will go through the page where a particular month has to be selected. And once you select that, it will ask you TCS credit received, and 4 tiles also will get displayed. In that first tile, if you click, it will show you who all deducted TDS. Now you have to select, if those are correct, you have to select those boxes and click submit button. And then please come out of that, click generate summary. It will say proceed to file, click that. Once you file the return, it is not a separate form, it is just a normal TDS form only. Once you submit it, the amount of TDS, whatever is deducted, will go and sit in the electronic cash ledger, not in the credit ledger. Because it is a tax amount, right? It will directly go and sit in the cash ledger. From that cash ledger, you can utilize it to pay off the output liability of the particular month. In case you don't have any output liability, that will remain in the cash ledger. It will go and sit in the, I mean to say, it will go and reflected in the next one.
So one question, importance of GST annual return from a audit perspective. Like, what are the crucial aspects that a taxpayer need to take care while filing the annual return, because that becomes the basis for, show cause notices being issued by the GST department. So typically, if you can highlight on the sales aspect or the and the input tax credit aspects, which needs to be taken care in order to avoid, show cause notices from the department.
So I think I have answered this question when I was discussing about GSTR 9 in detail, but still, since the question has come, I don't want to disappoint the student also. So with regard to GSTR 9, let me repeat once again. With first of all, reconciliation of turnover has to happen. As I told, when you are doing this GSTR 9, you please download the GSTR number 1 summary, which is there automatically in the portal. GSTR 3B summary also. Summary says nothing but April to March. Whatever is there, you please download. Compare that with the books, whatever are there. Now, in the books, the accountant also might have failed to pass an entry, or the accountant would have passed a wrong entry. Yes, these all he only has to rectify. See, rectifying in the books is very easy. You can go back because it is an accounting software. You can go back and happily rectify the entry. There is no problem. So try to rectify. Try to find out which sale the accountant has missed. Try to find out what sale excessively, or of course, no accountant will show excess sales because the tax liability will increase. So what sale has been underreported? Yes, for that you have to take the details of sales made by him. That is the reason from the accounting software, you please try to export it in the Excel, so that happily if you put a VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP formula, it becomes very easy and happily you can go through the same. And then you have to mention the same turnover, whatever is there, provided you should be satisfied first. And moreover, you need not be worried because your turnover is not matching. Okay. You need not worried because your turnover is not matching, because if your turnover does not match, as I was telling you just now, it might be because of various reasons. So if at all you are shown the turnover in the next year, please mention that reasons there. This turnover was declared in the next year. That is the reason there is a difference in the turnover. And after reconciling the turnover, if at all any excess tax liability has to be paid, you have to pay it. So that will be the next sheet. Actually, in the GSTR 9 form, you have to pay the excess amount of tax. Now, when you are paying that excess amount of tax, you have to pay through one challan called DRC 03. Yes, DRC 03 is the challan from which you have to pay the excess amount of whatever underreported sales are there. Now, this is with regard to the sales, whereas with regard to the purchases, especially it will ask you input tax credit, first of all, as per the books. And as per the GSTR number 3B, what you have availed. Because in GSTR 1, there is no input tax credit. As per GSTR 3B, how much you availed. Same way, when you are filing GSTR 9, it will automatically import the values which are there in GSTR 2B. It will import the values. Then it will compare it with the input tax credit of GSTR 3B and the input tax credit what you are mentioning in the GSTR 9. Once all are matched, there is no problem. If it is not matched, then what is the reason? If it is excess claim, then what you have to do? You have to obviously pay that amount. Yes, if it is a deficit claim, that amount of ITC will be lapsed in that month. And this is with regard to ITC. But after mentioning this, every student, I have to make a note. Every professional has to make a note. There is one more sheet in GSTR 9 which says, you have to mention the value of purchases rate wise, 0%, 5%, 12%. In that also, if there is a reverse charge, that also you have to mention, and those values also should match accordingly. Otherwise, it is not possible to file the GSTR number 9. It will automatically show processed values error. So one has to be very cautious on all these parts. And yes, on expenses also, if there was any GST, such expense information also you have to mention in GSTR number 9. Earlier, when GSTR 9 was introduced for the first time, 17, 18, 18, 19 and all, they told, okay, expenses and all you can ignore and you can file. But now they have made it mandatory. You have to mention that expenses on which GST also has been filed.
So there's another question which has come up. It says, is it possible to reconcile the closing ITC as per books versus the closing ITC as per electronic credit ledger? My supplier is not filing his return, due to which there is accumulated ITC in my electronic credit ledger. So here, a small correction in the question itself. Unless your supplier has not filed the return, you are not supposed to take the credit. And how to reconcile is the question. Main focus is on reconciling of ITC as per books and the electronic credit ledger.
Okay. So one point we have to be very cautious here. The ITC as per the electronic credit ledger for the month of March, if you take as on 31st March in the electronic credit ledger, it will not match. It should not match also as per the books, as well as per the GST return. The reason being, the return for the month of March will be submitted in the month of April. So you have to take the balance as on 30th April and then only check. If you take the balance as on 31st March, it will show only the closing balance of February. It will not show you the closing balance of March. That means the ITC as per 31st, as on 31st March, as per the books and as per the electronic credit ledger should not be same. If it is same, then you are making some mistake, which is not correct at all. Whenever you are doing that, that's why whenever we are finalizing the books, we take the ITC as per 30th April. Because only as on 30th April, if you check, it will show you input availed in 31st March. Input availed in March 2000, so-and-so return. Output paid in so-and-so return, closing balance. That balance only should match with your books. Otherwise, you cannot. That's not the correct way also.
So, sir, can you focus on the interplay of income tax and GST? And can you highlight few things which needs to be taken care from both the tax angles, because now it has been very transparent between these two departments. If we do commit an error in income tax, then GST has repercussions, and likewise. So can you highlight on few practical aspects in this regard?
Sure. So even though this is actually not within the purview of today's topic, but still, since student has raised a question, I don't want to once again disappoint them. See, when till last year, there was no agreement between GST, CBIC and CBDT for sharing of any information till last year. But from last year, what they have done is, once you file GST returns, automatically that information will get reflected in form number 26AS, which is very clearly available in the income tax portal. Now, sometimes what happens is, you might have forgot to enter one value in GST return, because of which the turnover in income tax return might be more, but the turnover as per GST returns might be less. That means the values which are appearing in form number 26AS might be less, but the values as per your books might be more. Now here, you have to go as per the books only, not as per the values which are applicable appearing in form 26AS, because there is always a possibility to revise the GST return on or before 30th November, which I was saying you just now. So please go as per the books here, if at all your books are perfect. Now for that, what you have to do, you have to take necessary measures and steps to ensure that your client is maintaining proper books of accounts. And the turnover, if it is matching, well and good. But when will it match? I'll tell you, when we only do GST return, when we only do the audit, then it will automatically match, because we know we have to take proper care. Of course, when we are doing also, 1% chance of error is there, because we also are human beings. Ultimately, that kind of error, if it is there, also try to rectify the GST return, not the income tax return. In case there is a problem in the books, really, the accountant would have passed double entry. I mean to say, same entry for two invoices. Once again, two entries for one invoice. So because of that, the sales reflecting in income tax might be more. So for that, what you have to do is, every month, if you take the sales report from the client, it will become very easy for you to tally.
One question on the consequences if we do not file GSTR 10 within 3 months, that is, given by the provisions. What are the consequences?
See, as of now, the GST law also has not put any penalty measure as such on GSTR 10, like it has put it for GSTR number 9. So what I am anticipating is, maybe at the time of cancellation, they might not allow you to properly, totally cancel it. Rather, they might ask you to pay the amount along with the interest, because before filing GSTR 10, that point the law has already told. So once you have applied for cancellation, it does not mean you are relieved of all your liabilities. This point is there very clearly. So maybe at the time of filing the GSTR 10, and when you approach the officer, they might give you a notice.
And just to add on, maybe the general penalty clause of not adhering to the provisions might also be applicable in this case.
Yeah.
And another last question to conclude the session. Now the onus to take input tax credit is on the business, and they need to ensure that their supplier has filed GST returns, and then only we'll be able to claim the credit. So practically, how do we approach this? And is there any facility on the GSTIN showing the status of the supplier's payment status?
Yeah, see, in first of all, we have to follow up with the client through the mails only. Shoot up a mail or call him continuously, bombard him. That is one procedure. Yes. If you really want to show him any proof, then go to your GSTR 2A and 2B. Look at the credits which are available, because customer-wise, the registered taxpayer-wise credits are available in GSTR 2A and 2B. Just take a screenshot of that. Please, sir, in this, your name is not appearing. That means you haven't filed your GSTR return. So automatically, you can show that as you can take a screenshot or a snippet of that screen, and you can put it through mail. In case you are not so formal, take a snap in your camera, immediately send it through WhatsApp. Then and there, the matter is closed. So I know the burden is more. But there is no other option. We, as an auditors or upcoming auditors, we have to, inculcate this methodology for the clients also. Because we should not waste our time on all these nonsense things.
So there's another question which is saying, sir, my GST registration is cancelled, but I have credit in my electronic credit ledger. So what will happen to that credit? Is it a lapse, or do I have any option of filing it?
Actually, you have to debit it. While at the time of registration, you have to debit your electronic credit ledger. But strictly speaking, no one is doing that. Directly, the amount of ITC, it will get debited. I mean to say, it will lapse.
And what will happen if I missed reporting credit notes in my books, but I have reported the same in GSTR1?
How is it this? How is that possible?
Yeah.
How can you not record it in the books, but how will you record it in your GST returns?
So the question is like, how do we show this difference? Do we need to actually show? If yes, in which return?
No, see, you made a mistake in your books only. No, rectify your books, as simple as that. If you are very sure of GST returns, why you want to change the GST return? Go and rectify your books, no?
So there's one question. Sir, given the tight regime for registration, verification of SSC, output, sale value, tax, and mandatory reconciliation for turnover exceeding specified limit, how does large cases of fraudulent input tax credit arise? I know this is out of our discussion, but yeah, so the question revolves around how fraudulent ITC claims are happening.
Yeah, so fraudulent ITC claims, on a lighter note, it happens only by through fraudsters, as simple as that, who are not inclined towards following the law. So there are many cases where the GST department is outbursting such kind of fake invoices. Because of that only, mainly the input tax credits and all come up unnecessarily. And this generally happens in the wholesale markets, especially. I'll not name any of them, but still, this is the procedure. Generally, it happens. And GST is always, departments are always watching. Officers are watching the movement of the transactions, etc. And then they will definitely, outburst all such kind of fake cases. For that reason, I'll tell you a small example of one of my own client who had been running a bar and restaurant. Yes, so in that bar and restaurant, we filed I only used to file the GST return. I filed a GST return using taking 45,000 as a sale in a particular month. Yes, but actually the GST department, you see what they have done is the bank account details what we gave while at the time of filing the GST registration. I mean, it's application for registration. They have started tracking the bank statement. Now, in that particular month, the amount of transactions in the bank statement was actually 1.5 lakh. But we have shown the turnover of only 45,000. Now, they got a doubt that we are creating some, we are reducing our output liability. Immediately, they called my client and client routed the call to me. Then I answered only one point. Please understand, this is a bar and restaurant. On liquor, there is no GST, first of all. So the difference is nothing but the liquor sale. Then he was also satisfied. So this kind of things also will happen. Yes. So we have to be sensible enough in answering the questions. But with regard to fraudster, the intention of fraudster itself is different. So there is no question of, we coming and answering all these points.
So thank you so much, Srinath sir, for, giving us your valuable time on a Sunday. I hand over the session to Kapil sir now.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Bhavani ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone, to the one and all present online. Honorable Chairman SSCB Board of Studies Operation, CA Sushil Kumar Goyal ji, in his absentia. Respected Vice Chairman SSCB, CA Sridhar Mupalla ji, in his absentia. Today's session and all the participants. It is such an honor for me to get the opportunity to thank you all dignitaries. On behalf of the SSCB Board of Study Operation, I extend a warm welcome to the students present online in webinar. I would like to express my gratitude to today's speaker, CA Srinath ji, for their presence and giving a commendable coverage on the topic, encouraging us with his words and enhancing the knowledge in clear-cut way presented to the students. I would like to express my gratitude to the moderator, CA Bhavani ji, for her presence and contribution to make this webinar a great success, and for giving an excellent coverage to queries and encouraging us with her words and wisdom, enhancing the knowledge in lucid way presented to the students. I must thank the whole organizing team, volunteers for working hard for the every weekend to make this series of webinars successful day to by day. I congratulate all the participants for their active participation. Thank you everyone once again for making it a great success. I would like to inform you that it was the 40th continuous live webinar of SSEB, and approx 10,000 students participants have seen every webinar. So around, you can say, like 4 lakh students got benefited by this webinar series. Thank you. Thanks a lot to all of you. Thank you.
And